Gameranx brings you another episode of Before You Buy, the show where we give you a little taste of the gameplay and our initial impressions of new games, hoping to help you inform a buying decision, at least giving you a little bit more information about the game though. I'm Falcon and today we're doing Valkyria Revolution, and it's not the best thing since sliced bread. So where to start with this? When you buy this game and start it up, you think, wow, this is a gorgeous game. You're treated to a nice cinematic, everything looks top-notch, presentation is great for a JRPG. And then you start the game, or rather, then you start a bunch of cinematics that eventually lead into tiny bits of gameplay that are separated by a ton of mini cutscenes and even more random loading screens. So when you actually do get into the gameplay, it's Dynasty Warriors-ish. At this point, you should probably know what that means. Although I'll say this, it retains some of the Valkyria stuff by having menus. You can control other party members. They have different attacks that you can get by bringing up a menu. You can pretty much control your entire party, which is cool. Don't get me wrong, I like this stuff. And once you get sort of used to the rhythm, it's a pretty good gameplay system. I enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of cool to have one of those Dynasty Warriors style games with some of the more RPG elements still kept in there, although not enough for me to say it changes it from being arcadey. It's still a pretty arcadey game. And there are times where these systems actually end up feeling a little bit like they were forced in. During the boss fights are when they shine, but pretty much any other time it feels like, why am I even bothering? I mean, when you're battling a bunch of enemies and the AI pretty much does what it should do anyhow, there's no real reason to use most of the systems involved with the game. You can generally just kind of Dynasty Warrior, hack and slash through stuff and use special moves and magic from time to time depending on some context. Something I have to say I really don't like about the battle system, however, is the action gauge. Now what this does is essentially attempt to sort of mimic turn-based combat, I think. At least that's what it seems like it's trying to do, is to make it feel like, oh, well, it's not my turn, I need to either get away or avoid getting hit or something. But the problem is this is a Dynasty Warriors style hack and slash game where they literally make you stop doing anything after you've done a couple of moves, or one move, depending on, the power of the move. Now that being said, this does actually work out well during a boss fight because the boss fights are kind of constructed like a puzzle, although they aren't very complex puzzles, at least the ones that I've played so far. I'm a little ways into the game, and I'll say I think I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to get from the gameplay. The story is basically the history of the revolution in Jutland, and it's told through a student-teacher back and forth in a cemetery, and it kind of randomly doesn't understand that you don't want to be watching two people talk about the action that you could be partaking in when they go back to it. Frankly, this probably would have worked better if that part of it was just not there at all, and you just experienced the revolution. It kind of exists for foreshadowing purposes, and it does a bad job with the foreshadowing because it makes things too painfully obvious. But I'll say that basically every point in the game is visually amazing. It's got the Valkyria look to it, but they frankly keep getting better at it. Now, I don't really have a lot more to say about the gameplay, and that's, I think, not a good thing. Like, I want to bring up Hyrule Warriors. It was basically Zelda, but Dynasty Warriors. It was made by the people that made Dynasty Warriors, so it did have the benefit of that, but that game comes together in such a coherent and well-made way that keeps you involved the whole time and never makes you roll your eyes or get bored because you got another loading screen in the middle of a cinematic that was already too long anyhow. And that's what Valkyria Revolution is like. I'm not joking, there are loading screens all the time. Short ones, long ones, all the time. This game loads more than a forklift in a warehouse. And I would say it probably wouldn't be as bad if the loading took place in between actual gameplay most of the time. But the gameplay is stopped so much for these random, bad acted cutscenes that don't need to be there. You constantly feel as though any momentum that you had in playing this game is just constantly dropped. A game like this should have a lot more of that dialogue happening as events are unfolding that you're controlling. A cutscene is cool, sure. I like cutscenes in games, but it feels like they want to say so much obvious crap about what's going on that if they did let the characters talk while you were playing the game, you'd probably get through the level before they got done talking about the level. And that's not to say this isn't a fun game. When you're actually allowed to play it, this is a fun game. It is not perfect by any means, but I'd say this was a solid, pretty good game if it didn't constantly interrupt you with cutscenes and loading. However, that's exactly what it does. When I say that they have to talk about everything they see, I mean every character has to do it too. Nobody doesn't get a word in edgewise. Everybody gets their turn. Like, this dialogue is so democratic, and that sounds like a good thing. However, it's not, because you don't need to hear from every single character all the time. You need to hear from the character that has a thought. But the sad thing is, none of them really do. Unless you count war is bad as an original thought, and it's not an original thought. Nobody in the world thinks war is good, except for a select few profiteering jerks. Which, by the way, the uniforms that the bad guys have are supposed to look like military-oriented and all that, but to me they look like they're in a marching band. They are hilariously cartoonish, and at no point are they believable. They don't make me hate them, they're just there. So a pretty good battle system on top of a bad story, at least from what I've observed so far, and dialogue that is so tiresome that you'll want to skip it every single time. But you won't know what's going on because that's the only time they tell you what's going on. So, I mean, you can play basically just a hack and slash action game in which you have no idea what's going on if you want. But personally, I do not think this game is worth your money. If you're a die-hard Valkyria fan who's wanted to try a more action RPG experience within the Valkyria look, feel, and story, I mean, give it a shot. But for anybody who is not that person, it's just plain not worth it. And even for that person, there's a decent chance it's not going to be worth it. There's just not enough worthwhile content in this game. Even at $40, it's a ripoff. If this game was free, I might give it a slightly nicer review, but that is not the kind of closing comment that you want said about your video game. I'd say avoid it. It's frustrating, it's boring, and anything that's good in it gets drowned out in a cacophony of other things. Have you played this game? What do you think? If you enjoyed this video, please click like, and if you're not subscribed, now would be a good time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.